A heist in Tombbridge, Kent had just entered the record books, surpassing any other cash robbery in the UK. In 75 minutes, 7 thieves had ransacked a Securitas depot, fleeing with over 5 tons of cash in excess of £50 million. Officers soon discovered that the depot manager, Colin Dixon, his wife and young child had been kidnapped at gunpoint prior to the raid and forced to reveal confidential information.
How much is in there?
Most people put themselves in that situation. Would you comply?
How many doors are there?
Of course you would.
You need a key to get in there. Then you come into the first office. Then there's a single door there.
When Colin had told the gang what they needed, they drove him to the depot, with his eyes taped and hands bound. He had no idea what was happening to his wife and child.
At 1:27 of the Volvo pulls up outside of the depot. Just prior to this, the robbers had given Colin Dixon his glasses back and they unbound his hands. To all intents and purposes, when they arrive at the depot, he's not bound in any way, he's looking normal.
The staff, having seen Colin there and with the police officer, obviously realising something is wrong. They were duped into believing that there was a problem. They went into the control room, and it was at that point that the police officer then produced a firearm. And immediately the person in the control room was subdued. At that stage, Colin was made to open the gates to allow the rest of the gang of robbers into the premises.
The thieves then set to work stealing 17 cages full of 10, 20 and £50 notes and loading 3 shopping trolleys full of cash. As the police studied the evidence further, they made another startling discovery.
As you watch the CCTV, you suddenly become aware of somebody else on the back of the lorry. And as they're filling up, you can see Lynn Dixon and her child come into view, but they kept on the lorry while they load it.
Once they'd loaded the money, Lynn Dixon was forcibly lifted into one of the cages, along with her child.
Despite the trauma, the young child managed a remarkable act of bravery.
One of the cages containing Mrs. Dixon and her child is damaged. They managed to get her child out of the cage, and the child then assists another member of staff who has hidden keys on her to open the cages and free everybody.
Detective Chief Inspector Mick Judge and Detective Sergeant Andy Nichol soon discovered the extremes this gang was capable of. They were looking for ruthless kidnappers who wouldn't think twice about using violence. They began searching for clues at the depot and hunting for their first lead. They didn't have to wait long before a tip-off sparked their first line of inquiry.
What actually did come in very, very quickly was some information that a lady called Michelle Hogg had been involved in helping disguise some people.
The police believed the gang had used sophisticated makeup to disguise themselves during both kidnappings.
We knew that 3 men in total, posing as police officers, had been involved. And we knew that they hadn't attempted to cover their faces. But we also guessed that there must have been some way that they'd altered their appearance. We didn't know what prosthetics were, what they did, and how they were used. But in effect, it's a way of altering your appearance. It is not a complete mask, but it's a way you can alter skin colour, hair, nose, facial features, ethnicity.
We went to Michelle Hogg's house and we arrested her and took her into custody and commenced a search of her flat. Whilst doing that, we recovered various bits and pieces. We sealed her wheelie bin and took it with us. But at the bottom of that was a black bin liner, and inside was a veritable Aladdin's cave to a detective. It had latex in it, it had hair in it, it had dyes in it, it had all sorts of theatrical makeup, which tend to suggest that we were on the right track.
As the contents of Michelle Hogg's bin were forensically examined, Another breakthrough confirmed to Andy Nichol that they were closing in on the gang.
We have a report of an abandoned parcel force van at a pub very close to the A249, very close to where Colin Dixon was kidnapped. Within that, we found cardboard boxes, plastic wrappers, and paper towels.
As these items were sent to forensics, more information came in.
But at the same time, we also recovered 2 burnt-out vehicles.
These 2 vehicles are together. One of them's a Volvo, one of them's a Vectra. In the boot of the Volvo, which isn't burnt, we recover Colin Dixon's briefcase.
Within 72 hours of the robbery, Judge and Nichol already had a huge amount of evidence to go on. But more was yet to come.
We found the red LDV van and the Vauxhall Vectra had both been purchased using a false name, but had been registered to an address that had links to Stuart Royal. So we have a pointer towards our first suspect.
Royal was a second-hand car dealer from Maidstone. Previously unknown to Kent police, he was now closely linked to the biggest cash robbery in Britain. As officers were drawing in, they got another breakthrough.
On Friday, a white Ford Transit van was found in the car park of the Ashford International Hotel. That vehicle was found to contain around £1.3 million, a Scorpion machine pistol, and a balaclava. We could be sure that the money found had come from the depot. There were markings on the wrappers which clearly showed that it had come from there. We made inquiries in relation to the ownership of that van, and that led us to Lee Rusher.
Rusher was from the Tombbridge area and already known to the police. Officers discovered he knew Stuart Royal and a third suspect they were interested in. Albanian Jetmir Butchpapa. He'd worked with Rusher in the past and was also familiar to the police. He had no history of armed robbery. As detectives closed in on the gang, more vital evidence came through.
We have a report from a member of the public that there's some cages have been dumped at a place called Freningham Farm and very close to the scene of the kidnapping of Colin Dixon. These are the cages that contained the money. They had property of the Bank of England actually on the cages, so it's a bit of a giveaway. Where they're actually dumped at Freningham Farm is an area that is used to store vehicles. The person storing these vehicles and had links to Stuart Royal.
Further clues were unearthed at the farm.
During the search, we found £30,000 in the boot of a car, and that money from the labels on it had clearly come from the depot. A forensic search of that vehicle discovered a Red Bull can.
The drinks can was sent for DNA tests. Back at HQ, just 3 days into their inquiry, Kent police were getting very close to the culprits.
By the Friday, we really were looking at 4 key suspects. We had the names Lee Rusher, Jetmir Butchpapa. We were linked to Stuart Royal, and we also had the name Lee Murray.
Murray was a world-class kickboxer from southeast London. He wasn't known to Kent police. With the evidence mounting only days into the inquiry, detectives decided to visit some of their suspects.
The following morning, armed officers executed warrants at Lee Rusher's house and Jetmir Butchpapa's houses. Neither of the men were there. It became clearly apparent there was significant evidence within Lee Rusher's home address. We found in their receipts for prosthetic makeup. We found police stickers, which is something you would stick on the side of a car to make it look like a police car. We also found a piece of paper with a reference on it, and it was the grid of the Ordnance Survey which covered the Securitas depot. In his main bedroom, we found a sketch plan of the inside of the Securitas depot.
They're in this room here. Be quiet.
Damning evidence.
The suspects were nowhere to be seen, but they'd left behind a trail of evidence. Although they weren't at home to be questioned, it wasn't long before the police tracked them down.
On Sunday the 26th, it was decided to arrest Stuart Royal.
Stuart Royal. On the floor!
He was located and taken out by armed officers and taken into custody. On the Monday, we managed to locate Lee Rusher and Jetmir Butch-Papa in South London when they were arrested and brought back to Kent on suspicion of the robbery and the kidnapping.
As the three men were grilled, forensic results came back on the contents of Michelle Hogg's bin.
The latex was separated and it was examined, and so was some of the false hair that was in there and the other makeup parts. These are vital pieces of evidence. As we start to examine these, we get DNA hits. Those DNA hits belong to Lee Rusher.
Tests on the drinks can found at the farm also pointed to Rusher.
From that Red Bull can, we've got a DNA profile of Lee Rusher.
Forensic results were helping piece together this complex investigation.
Examination of the two vehicles found burning reveal that the Vectra has blue lights fitted and a siren fitted. This is our bogus police car. We know this. It also reveals that it's got some bullets in it, which are of a certain type of ammunition were used in Scorpion machine pistols.
After examining the contents retrieved from the red van, detectives uncovered more damning evidence.
The boxes turned out to be the boxes that held holdalls. These holdalls were subsequently discovered to contain all the money that we discovered later on. The plastic that was found in the back turned out to be the plastic that was the shrink wrapping from the holdalls when they were inside the boxes. The paper towel, on that we found the shoe print of the Dixon's child.
The suspect linked to the van, Stuart Royal, was already in custody with some serious questions to answer. Masses of evidence was being uncovered, but so far, more than £50 million was still missing. This changed when another tip-off led them to a location over 30 miles away.
We execute a warrant in Welling, South London, at a premises called ENR Cars. And in the corner of the compound is a container, like a lorry container. And having opened the doors, in there we discover £9,655,000, all in bags, Eagle and Monarch holdalls. Significance of those is they come shrink-wrapped in plastic bags and boxes that were found in the back of the red LDV parcel force van. All the money is still in Securitas wrappers, so it's easy to identify. Next to the doors of this is a boat called the Shaky Jakey, and there's also a white van. These are linked to a man called Roger Coots.
Coots was an old friend of Lee Murray and ran a garage in Welling. His vehicles were just inches from the loot stashed in the lockup. But it was another crucial piece of evidence that was about to plant him firmly at the scene of the crime.